In this PowerPoint for mtts 1, 2, and 3, we will be going over legal issues with technology in the classroom, as well as copyright, fair use, and the acceptable use policy. Some legal issues with technology in the classroom include copyright, which will be examined further in the next few slides, as well as intellectual property and piracy. What is copyright? What is the copyright law? The United States copyright law protects original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium, including literary, dramatic, musical, artistic, and certain other intellectual works. This protection is available to both published and unpublished works. When trying to secure information about copyright for yourself and for your students, you need to get permission from the copyright holder if you want to use something that's copyrighted in the classroom, and there's a 5-step procedure that you can follow. First, you need to determine whether or not permission is needed. In most cases, it is. Second, you need to identify the owner, identify the rights that you would need, contact the owner and negotiate whether or not payment is required, or any other form of recognition that the author would want, and then you need to get that permission in writing. This whole process is recommended to be done in writing. In-practice tips for copyright in the classroom would be to make sure that material on the school district's website doesn't violate any copyright. So that would be a good thing for all educators to check up on. Material should not be downloaded and used in a way that violates the copyright owner in the classroom setting. You need to make sure that the information you are using has been made available for classroom use. And also, students' work is their intellectual property, so they have their own copyright on it. So before you use that work, you need to receive permission from the students, or if they're minors, from their parents. And public domain documents can be used for free in the classroom without having to be granted permission, so that's another good thing to keep in mind. What is fair use? This definition of fair use comes from the Library of Congress, and it says that fair use is an exception to the exclusive protection of copyright under American law. It permits certain limited uses without permission from the author or owner. Depending on the circumstances, copying may be considered fair for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. And there are 4 factors that determine whether or not a source can be used as for fair use, and they're as follows. What is the purpose of the use of this resource? The nature of the copyrighted work, the amount of work being used in relation to its full copyrighted length. So are you going to be using a couple of sentences from an article, or are you going to be using the article in its entirety, as well as the effective use on the value of the original copyright. In-practice tips for fair use include looking to use sources that you can claim fair use for. That would be a good place to start when looking for sources to use in the classroom. Be very careful when determining whether or not something can be used for fair use. Be mindful of the source you're getting information from. There are slightly different guidelines for a variety of digital media, so this would be music versus movies versus literature. Be sure to check if the media students are using for projects qualify for fair use. If a student is using a song in a digital story, make sure that they have rights to use that song. As well as utilizing resources such as the Library of Congress for more information. Next, I'm going to talk about acceptable use policy, which is something that would be implemented district by district, school by school, however you have it set up. What is it? An acceptable use policy is a document which outlines the set of rules with which users of a computer network must abide by, as well as the rights of the network's administrators. There are different components of an acceptable use policy. The main ones that should be focused on are the more popular aspects of using a computer network, such as accessing the accessing the internet and broadcasting information to classrooms. And these are some other components to keep in mind when you're drafting an acceptable use policy, making sure you state why the educational usage and benefits of the internet, listing the instructional values the internet will fulfill, listing the duties of teachers, parents, and students pertaining to internet usage, guidelines for ethical conduct, consequences for violating the acceptable use policy, description of appropriate internet usage, statement which says using the internet and the computer network is a privilege, not a right, and terms and conditions must also be included in your acceptable use policy. Some in-practice tips for acceptable use policy being implemented in the classroom and for drafting are some of these as follows. Having an introductory lesson that outlines the acceptable use policy for students so that they know when they're going to start using the computers, what's expected of them, what the school expects of them, what you as a teacher expect from them, and the kinds of rules that they need to be following when they are using the computer and the internet. You should post the acceptable use policy in a place where students can view it when they're using the computers, sending a copy of it home for parents to review with their students, and encourage them to use the internet appropriately at home as well as at school. Using the acceptable use policy as an opportunity to teach about digital citizenship and other technologies other than internet access on a computer.